Okay, so today's lesson, we're going to be looking at another unseen poem. This time, the title of the poem is Does It Matter by Siegfried Sassoon. So obviously the other unseen poem that I've done recently was also a Siegfried Sassoon poem. I've got a bit of an obsession with Sassoon and his friend Wilfred Owen. I really love poems, and part of the reason I love them so much as a teacher is the content is relatable, I think, even for modern audiences such as ourselves, with conflict being an eternal thing that seems to happen constantly throughout time. But also, they're just generally really good poems to be able to analyse and understand. So, if you could start off by writing down the title of the poem, how can I analyse and understand the unseen poem? Does it matter? So, just give yourself a minute or two to write that down. Pause if you need to. Okay, so going to get into the starter. So, same task as we normally do, and that is to focus on the title of the poem. So write down the title of the poem on your sheet or in your book, whatever it is you're working on, and then just annotate the poem. When I say annotate it, what does this title make you think of? Write down as many ideas as you can think of. So first and foremost, does it matter? Does what matter? What could it be? When do we normally think this type of thing? Is it a positive or a negative thought, generally speaking? Just write down as many ideas as you can possibly think of. Now, you may recognise Sassoon being a war poet, so you might also then start to think, how could this possibly relate to the war itself? So jot down as many ideas as you possibly can for that one. Pause if you need to. I'd give yourself a few minutes to attempt that. Okie dokie. So we're going to have a little look at the poem itself now. I'm going to read through the poem and then we're going to go through some ideas. So, does it matter losing your legs? For people will always be kind, and you need not show that you mind when others come in after hunting to gobble their muffins and eggs. Does it matter losing your sight? There's such splendid work for the blind, and people will always be kind as you sit on the terrace remembering and turning your face to the light. Do they matter? Those dreams in the pit. You can drink and forget and be glad, and people won't say that you're mad, for they know that you fought for your country, and no one will worry a bit. Okay, so obviously, unfortunately, you can see some of my notes that I've done. I originally was going to plan on going through these after and completely forgot and left them up there, but that's fine. What I want you guys to do is to go through this poem yourself and annotate and highlight your own ideas on the language and structure and form that you notice. So give yourself around 5 minutes or so to do that. In order to help you with that, I'm going to jump forward to this task here. Unfortunately, screen's frozen, so I'm just gonna. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to have a little look at these questions here that will hopefully help you a little bit. Why is the title of the poem so important and significant? What is the rhyme scheme? How does that contribute towards the tone of the poem? Why do you think the poet has chosen to use rhetorical questions? And how does the poem reflect the brutality of war? One final thing to consider, read the poem aloud and mark the places where the poem seems to pause. How many sections can the poem be divided into, and why do you think the poet has done this, in your opinion? I would allow yourself probably around 5-10 minutes to answer those questions and annotate the poem in as much detail as possible. Pause the video now to allow yourself enough time to do that. Okay, so just going to go through some of the ideas that I come up with. So when I attempted this, I tried to replicate the conditions that you guys will be going through when you do this in your exams. And that was to probably give myself no more than around 5 minutes to think of some ideas. I didn't actually use the full 5 minutes. I managed to come up with some ideas very quickly, just some really obvious things that I spotted. So the first thing that I immediately noticed was the repetition of "does it matter?" And this is a phrase that's repeated 2.5 times. It changes slightly in the third stanza, and that is significant as well that it does change. So does it matter losing your legs? Does it matter losing your sight? Do they matter? Those dreams in the pit. And obviously the title of the poem as well is Does It Matter? So that's obviously a really powerful expression that's repeated throughout this. And when we annotated that at the very beginning, I ask you to come up with some ideas of your own. And I think that's sort of the point behind this phrase, is that it can mean anything. It means multiple things. There are many things you might argue whether they matter or not, especially in regards to a war, or in this case, the after effects of a war. It could perhaps be the poet or the persona questioning his existence, questioning the things that have actually happened to him, even questioning his own dreams. Um, it also adds to a feeling of helplessness that he continuously asks himself this question, does it matter, over and over again. Other thing I noticed quite quickly was this rhyme that we have: kind and mind, blind and kind, and glad and mad. Now, some of those expressions actually juxtapose with each other as well. Glad and mad are sort of conflicting um, emotions, ideas. Blind and kind, you might argue, the same. And that could also further back up this torn mindset that the persona or the narrator seems to find himself in. And that's a theme that runs throughout this poem: what's expected of you versus how you actually feel and what you're actually going through. Um, and then you'll also notice that actually the rest of the lines don't rhyme. So hunting, eggs, remembering, light, country bit. Um, there is no rhyme, at least not that I'm aware of, in any of these parts here. So why do we have rhyme here but not here? That's also something to consider. So it could be linking to that idea of having a conflicted or contrasting emotions and thoughts. On the one hand, you're trying to get through the experience you've been through, trying to make the best of a bad situation, but ultimately it's completely bleak. And it might also link to this idea of the mental illness you might suffer after being blinded as a result of conflict. So the other thing that I noticed very quickly was that there's three stanzas and they sort of escalate in bleakness and almost I wouldn't say aggressiveness, but the tone of the poem gets more aggressively bleak as it goes on. If you compare the first stanza, people will always be kind and you need not show that you mind, versus the very end, you can drink and forget and be glad, and people won't say that you're mad, for they know that you fought for your country, and no one will worry a bit. So it definitely gets bleaker as the poem goes on. So hopefully you guys come up with some of your own ideas. If you're struggling, I'd recommend researching that poem if you feel that you need to and you're really struggling with this particular lesson. Website I'd recommend is genius.com. Actually was a website that was originally designed for annotating rap lyrics. Now I'm going to try and show you this very quickly, if you just bear with me. So I'm going to do just going to pause the video very quickly. Okay, so genius.com. So this is the website I was referring to. Actually started as a website to annotate rap songs, believe it or not, but it does have poets on here. So if we type in, hopefully this will work, does it matter? Hopefully the poem by Siegfried Sassoon. Yes, it does pop up. You click on there. And there we have it. Now this one actually hasn't been done that much. But you'll find with other poems, especially ones in your anthology, they would have had a lot more annotations contributed by members of the public. So it's a bit like Wikipedia for poetry and songs. People can add their own ideas and thoughts. If you just hover and click over, it gives you some ideas on the questions. So this one is an example. Not only is this rhetorical question, the title of the poem is also its refrain occurring in the first line of every stanza. Already this poem takes a sarcastic tone. Now, not every comment is necessarily going to be true and applicable, but it's certainly a very useful website that I'd recommend using. Okay, right. I'm going to get back to our lesson. Bear with me. There we go. Okie dokie. So, additional task. If you're really struggling with this poem, try storyboarding the events. Okay, take specific lines and events that occur and happen, and storyboard them to try and help you visualize what's actually going on in this poem. Right, what I would like you to do now, just to give you a deeper understanding of the poem, is to complete what we call a Splats analysis. So that means you need to go through and answer each of these questions that we've got here. So what do you think the poem is about? Subject. Why has the author written the poem? What is the purpose behind it? Language, what type of language has been used and what language devices are used? Audience, who is this aimed at? Themes, what are the key themes? And structure, how has the poem been structured? Now, we've already covered a couple of those ideas. When I go through this with you, I'm just going to offer I'm not going to go through every single section because this is for your benefit, not mine. But I'm just going to go through a couple of ones that I think are important. As we go on and we do more unseen lessons, I will cover some of the other sections so you do get a broad understanding of how you would approach each one. Okay, so pause the video now and just give yourself a few minutes to attempt each of those different sections. Okay. Now, this is actually a mistake. This says persona, but I go with purpose. So I'm actually going to cover that one now. Purpose. Why do you think the author has written this poem? So personally, I'll just go back to the poem now so we can have a look at it. I think the author has written this poem to highlight the depressing state of affairs for soldiers who are wounded in battle and have to come back and try and live some sort of normal life. And I think for me, that's particularly highlighted in that last stanza. You can drink and forget and be glad, and people won't say that you're mad. So it's almost an acceptance from the general public that you are allowed to, drink yourself, I suppose, into oblivion or depression because of what you've been through, and especially as you've been horrifically blinded. I mean, it's neither positive nor negative. It just paints a really, I don't know, honest picture of what it's like to survive such a thing. And that last couple of lines there, for they know that you fought for your country and no one will worry a bit. Again, linking to that acceptance, you can almost, do what you want if you've come back as a soldier, and it'll be glossed over, even if what you're doing is driving yourself into a depression, or acting in an unpleasant way. Okay, the other thing I would perhaps look at, I'm just going to look at themes. Unfortunately, just going to look at themes. So what are the themes that are in this poem? So I certainly think depression, injury, war, society are some of the key themes that we see in this poem. Now, when you go through this yourself, I'd certainly recommend for each of these sections that you get yourself some evidence to back up what it is exactly you're saying. So for each sort of section you complete, try and find some evidence that backs up exactly what it is you're saying. Okay. There we go. Right, so I'm just going to go on to this question now. How does the poet explore the harsh and brutal nature of war in the poem? Does it matter? So you need to go back through the poem now, and you would have hopefully highlighted and found some things that you can talk about for this. But you need to find specific evidence that answers that question. What shows us the brutal nature of war in that poem? You could look at the rhetorical questions that we pointed out before. That last stanza in particular certainly highlights the brutal after effects of war. Remember, this is not necessarily going to be the direct consequence of war or war itself, but the after effects, the brutal nature of war in its aftermath. What is the result of war from people, for people after the war has ended? To help you with this then, so we're going to just scroll down, and here we have a writing frame for you to use. So what I'd recommend you do now is to pause this video and use this writing frame to write one perfect paragraph or more if you've got time. If you have time to write more than one, I would focus one of your paragraphs on language and then perhaps decide to look at structure. So then we're covering more of the assessment objectives that we're given for this particular question in our exam. We need to have a good understanding of language structure and form. So we should try and focus on all of those things, a breadth of things, not just language. Okay, so pause the video now and give that your best shot. So one further thing that you may decide to do, if you've written your paragraph now, have a look at this help sheet. This is on a previous video of mine as well. But I want you to go back through and I want you to edit your response now. If you've used words like shows, quote, also, simple vocabulary, Try and change that, edit it now for more complex vocabulary that you see here. This is just going to enhance your use of technical vocabulary and make you sound more articulate when you give your response. Okay, so that takes us to the end of today's lesson. You may just decide you want to sum up in a sentence or two. How does Sassoon's poem explore the harsh and brutal nature of war? I'd really like you to post in the comments any paragraphs you've done or any statements you can make in answer to that, and I'll get back to you in the comment section. Hopefully this has been helpful. Any questions, please post a comment on the video, or if I teach you, please get to me on Edmodo and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you very much for watching.